Synthesis is about combining two or more sources to present a new argument. It's necessary when working on research papers, literature reviews, or other projects involving a lot of research, but it's also something we do on a regular basis. If you've ever listened to multiple people's opinions before making a decision of your own, you've engaged in a type of synthesis. When we talk about academic writing, synthesis is about demonstrating how sources interact with each other by identifying common themes among multiple sources, points of agreement or disagreement between sources, and explaining why those interactions are significant to the bigger picture. When you're working with just a couple of sources, synthesis can be pretty straightforward, but the more sources you have, the more complicated the process can get. A concept matrix is a useful organizational tool for synthesizing multiple sources. It provides a visual representation of both the important aspects of your topic and connections between sources. To make a concept matrix, start with a grid. Then list the authors or sources down one side, and the specific aspects of a topic or themes across the top. You can then mark which sources address which aspects, giving you an easy-to-see overview of potential interactions between sources. Let's take a closer look at how you move from this matrix to building your synthesis. The concept matrix is helpful to identify opportunities for synthesis by showing you where sources overlap. For example, 4 out of the 5 articles here talk about natural resource levels, so you know this is probably an important aspect to address. But they may not be saying the same thing about natural resource levels, and that's where your synthesis comes in. Ochoa and Mayer might link natural resource levels to urbanization, while Baker and Jackson might focus on the connection between natural resource levels and biodiversity, but they also talk about urbanization. Once you've identified a point of overlap, like this one, you want to start asking questions about how those sources overlap and why that matters. One way to think of it is like this. If Ochoa and Mayer and Baker and Jackson were sitting around the dinner table together, what would they talk about? What would they agree on? What would they disagree on? How is it significant that some aspects are discussed by some authors but not the others? What might have changed between 1983, when Ochoa and Mayer's article was published, and 2015, when Baker and Jackson's article was published? Are Baker and Jackson filling in gaps that Ochoa and Mayer's research didn't address? How does Douglas fit into the conversation about natural resource levels? There are, of course, dozens of other questions to ask yourself about these sources and how they interact with each other. Just remember that your ultimate goal is to think about how you can use these interactions to present a bigger picture of the topic you're researching. In this second example about the globalization of sports, we can see a pretty clear split in our sources. These 4 are all talking about how globalization can create cultural meaning for a sport, while this source is instead talking about globalization eliminating diversity. When you consider how to present the bigger picture of this research, you may want to explain these opposing ideas. Here is a short paragraph that does just that. The first sentence here cites both McAloon sources. In the second sentence, the writer has paraphrased similar arguments from both Gutman and McGuire. They follow this up by explaining the opposing view and citing Brownell. This is, of course, only one small part of this writer's synthesis. Based on the concept matrix, the writer will probably want to move on to address how these sources talk about the influence of the Olympics and how that influence is addressed in relation to these opposing viewpoints. If you plan on using a concept matrix to help build a synthesis, and you want a worksheet to walk you through that process, this link will take you to one that you can print out. You can also come work in the Writing Center. Our whiteboard walls are perfect for building a concept matrix, and our consultants are always willing to talk through your ideas with you.